Okay. Good evening, everyone. I would like to welcome you all to tonight's lecture. Thank you for joining us for this lecture by Dr. Juan Acevedo, a lecture organized by IKU ASMC Guest Scholar Program. My name, as many of you know, is Sevgi Adak. I am faculty member and associate professor and head of research at AKU ISMC. It's my great pleasure to chair the event and introduce Dr. Acevedo tonight. But before doing that, I would like to just say a few words about AKU ISMC Guest Scholar Program. We started the program in September 2022, so it has been slightly more than a year. And today's lecture is the third public event that we organize within the program, and it will be the closing event of 2023. We are very fortunate and excited to close this year's guest scholar events with a lecture by Dr. Acevedo, who is visiting us from the University of Lisbon. He is actually the first colleague to visit us from University of Lisbon, and that's also particularly exciting for us because we are looking forward to furthering our collaboration with University of Lisbon. So the aim of the guest scholar program is further enrich the academic community of ISMC by inviting distinguished scholars, academics, researchers, acknowledged for their work in one of the strategic research aims of the Institute. The program is part of several other initiatives to expand our research and teaching collaborations with prominent universities from around the world. We will be continuing to host distinguished scholars like Dr. Acevedo in 2024 too. So please stay tuned and follow our events in the upcoming year. I would really encourage you to sign up to our newsletter if you haven't already done so, and follow us on social media so that you can be regularly updated about the exciting events and online short courses that we will be offering next year. So tonight's lecture will take us to a fascinating journey through Arabic navigation sources on the Indian Ocean collected from around the world. Our speaker, Dr. Juan Acevedo, is a graduate in classics from the Universidad Los Andes in Merida, Venezuela, and holds a PhD in history of philosophy from the Warburg Institute in London. After working for several years as an editor on Islamic studies and comparative religion, he is currently with the ERC project Desiderata at the University of Lisbon, studying early modern technosites across Eurasia, in particular Arabic manuscripts on Indian Ocean navigation. His main research interest lies in the field of conceptual and cultural history, especially at the foundations where cultures come together and where metaphysics and craftsmanship overlap through shared cosmological principles. His talk tonight is entitled, as you can see on the slide as well, Celestial and Maritime Grids and Circles, Digitising Cosmographical Manuscripts. So Juan, thank you, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Sevgi. And first of all, I would like to give an institutional thanks to AKU and the ISMC for the invitation to be here in this center, which it's never ceases to amaze me in the range of multifaceted activities that are happening here all the time in the different floors too. And a personal thanks to Leif and to Walid and Matthew who put this together, and to Sevgi for the warm welcome and the opportunity to share with you tonight, and hopefully to get some feedback from you. As part of the Rotter project, an ERC-funded project hosted by the University of Lisbon, my colleague Inês Benard and I have been engaged now for approximately 4 years in an extensive survey of and reappraisal of existing Arabic nautical sources on Indian Ocean navigation. This has meant going back to manuscript collections around the world, most often through catalogs or through colleagues with direct access, and occasionally visiting ourselves some of the libraries. And slowly but surely, from American libraries to Zanzibar and India and Cairo. We have been making a few interesting discoveries. All these we have recorded and continue to record in our open access technical note on Arabic navigation. Highly recommended. It's free. It's available from the Rotter website, where you can also have a look at the other technical notes. They are all free. A lot of interesting information for those interested in the field of the history of navigation. Not only Arabic navigation, but also a lot to do with the history of Iberian early modern navigation. And then this is just the newest version, where we had the collaboration of our Tübingen colleague, Juliane Müller. So this field of nautical studies has to do with a good part of my presentation today. But additionally, since we are in Lisbon, our archival research has given us the opportunity to delve into the Portuguese archives. And this is how we came in contact with the other main manuscript I will show you today, an encyclopedia in diagrams, which was found in the vaults of the Calouste Gulbenkian Museum and is the subject of a year-long exhibition which opened recently. And this is the page. You can check it out. And if you come to Lisbon before September next year, I would be happy to give you a guided tour of the exhibition. It's based on this particular manuscript, of which I will show more pages later, some pages later. So what I would like to do now is to briefly present 3 case studies from among these ongoing activities, and to share with you the range of questions, problems, and prospects brought out from our work. Please keep in mind that it's not my intention to present tried and tested and ready-to-eat results, but rather to share with you the cooking process in a friendly way. It may be a little messy, but I hope also more engaging and thought-provoking than a plain account of final results. Also, inevitably, and especially as regards digitisation, I am afraid I will at times be preaching to the choir here, going through some basics of digital humanities. But I think anyway, most of the team of the Open ITI and Kitab projects had to go to Paris tonight. So I was trying to find a guiding thread for my showcase, and I think I found one in this series of keywords for my talk. The keywords: diagrams, radial, concentric, and onion. Yes, here's the onion. The onion, this is very serious and a secret thing, means that whenever I speak of and show circular diagrams today, what is really meant is something three-dimensional. It's 3D spheres, sometimes called the planetary orbs, the spherical spaces within which the planets swim, using the medieval Arabic terminology. So with this healthy caveat, the onion is very healthy. Let's see my 3 cases. So first, it would be the Catalan Atlas, which is actually, this was not originally part of the presentation. Let me just, it was not originally part of the presentation, but at some point during the preparation of this talk, we chose the image that you saw in the page of the event, that very nice circle with lots of colors, and this is the Catalan Atlas, and it's part of it has to do with our work too. So I'm going to speak first of this page, and then something about the nautical works, as I have been mentioning, and then this Gulbenkian manuscript. It's called the Tuhfat al-Khaqan. So this first, the Catalan Atlas, is of late medieval Iberian provenance from Majorca. And the other, number 2, the nautical works, I will speak of 2 of the authors and their main works. And each of these fields poses distinctive questions and problems along the way from the paper and the parchment to the digital media. At the end, I would like to share some reflections about manuscripts and digital humanities generally. So the Catalan Atlas, yes, is a work produced in the 14th century in Majorca by the Cresques family of Jewish cartographers, very distinguished. It's a small book. I think it's 20 folios or not more than 30 folios. And most of it is charts, maps. And but at the beginning of the atlas, we have this page where it's a sort of description of the cosmos. So we can see here what we have here is a reconstructed image from the Library of Congress. So we can see here we have at the center of everything, there is a philosopher, the observer, yes. And then we have from the earth, the spheres of the elements here. Earth, of course, is at the center. And then we have water, earth, and fire. And then the spheres of the planets. And then here we have the heaven of fixed stars. And then we have the zodiacal signs, or the zodiacal signs are here, right? And then there we have seasons. The seasons are here in the four corners. And we have here, this is very interesting, and this is our main focus on this manuscript. In this circle here, we have the lunar mansions, the 28 stopovers of the moon, which were widely used in Arabic navigation and in Arabic agriculture, for example, during the Middle Ages. And for some reason, and we don't know exactly how, they came to appear here in this geographic work of the Mediterranean. And it's the only example we have found so far of the lunar mansions appearing in a geographical, in a technical context in Europe, or in this kind of technique, because otherwise they are always used in astrological and astromagical texts, the lunar mansion. So this is a very interesting point of contact and very rare, really, between the nautical tradition of the Mediterranean and the actual practice of the Indian Ocean pilots. And then we have times. These are in Roman numbers, the times of the moon, of the phases of the moon, down to the minute. This is 14th century. And which of course was very important to calculate the tides. So all in all, and this of course, we have a colleague in Lisbon who is a great expert on these calculations about the lunations and the tides. And we are working together to produce a little technical note also on this particular diagram, only explaining these things. He has made, well, just a reminder that these are 3D spheres, right? And so here my colleague Jose made this transversal cut of the diagram, so to appreciate there are 36 layers there packed with information. Yes. And yes. So I think that's it for the Catalan Atlas. And then moving on to the nautical works, and then which means also moving on to the Indian Ocean context. Our research here has involved mostly working on the two great authors of the Arabic nautical literature, Ahmad ibn Majid and Sulaiman al-Mahri, late 15th and early 16th century. But what I'm showing you here, just before as an opening, are some pictures of a recently discovered Lisbon manuscript, which is part of a latter family of Arabic nautical writings, which we are only starting to study now. Others very similar have been found in Cairo and in Qatar, in a few other places, in Oman as well. And I wanted to show it to you partly because it is a great example of circulation of knowledge. Note here the windrows, yes, with the here on the borders of on the edges of the circle are the names of the rising and setting points of the constellations, which were used in Arabic navigation to mark the 32 rums, the directions of space. So if we imagine that the polar star is here at the front and the sky is moving this way all the time, then one star would appear on this point of the horizon and then go up and set there. So the rising point and the setting point, let's say Thuraya, the Pleiades, yes? So the rising and the setting point of Thuraya would be used as markers of these points of the compass. So this is the way that the traditional navigators oriented themselves. A very old practice, actually even shared, very similar practices are known to have been used in Polynesia. So it is a practice that covers, a vast expanse of cultures using these the stars like this. But then we have here at the center the Kaaba, yes, oriented, and then at the same time we have this fleur-de-lis, the European influence. So this is a manuscript late early 19th century, late 18th century. And we suspect, we don't know well how it came to Lisbon, and we don't know well, apparently it has to do with Oman at some point, near Sur, it's the origin of the text. But the information it contains and some of the features, you see like this kind of ornamentation. And these here, for example, these patterns inside the 8 principal winds, I would be very grateful if any of you can give me a reference, knows anything about this kind of ornament here. We're still trying to find out where they come from. So, well, this is a big, there's a part, maybe now we have 6 or from 6 to 10 manuscripts that are awaiting proper description and comparison, really. But they have a lot to do with the nautical culture of also of the east coast of India, yes, Gujarat in particular. But as I was saying, our work has mostly had to do with Ahmad ibn Majid's Fawaid, fi Usul ilm al-Bahr wal-Fawaid, yes, the commentaries or the Fawaid on the principles of the science of the sea and its foundations, yes. And this has long been recognized as the most major comprehensive work of Arabic nautical literature. It was written around the 1490s, and it is the culmination of centuries of amalgamation between different Asian strands of nautical knowledge. There is much practical astronomy to determine the latitude, for example, bearings, and seasonal sailing times, sections on the usage of the 32 rums, which I was mentioning earlier on, and on the principles and the ethical requirements of navigation too. And what we have here is a picture of a Bodleian manuscript next to a Paris copy of the same text, which was the first one to come to scholarly attention in Europe about 100 years ago. It had long been a desire expressed by Abdallah al-Ruqūm to produce a new edition of the Fawaid text based on the Oxford manuscript, this 15th century manuscript. And I am working on this at the moment, on this new edition and translation. Naturally, we want to have an edition that takes advantage of the latest technology that will be digital as well as printed. And such a dual edition presents both the author and the typesetter and the developers, or we could say the researcher and the publisher, with interesting and novel options and problems. The end formats of choice would be PDF for portability. And here is on the right a PDF where we're going. And a TEI compliant XML for interoperability and for long-term manipulation of data. How to get there may vary to these end products. And there are currently various initiatives around the world working on new software or fine-tuning and developing existing options. Having spent too long among mathematicians, I ended up at some point using this kind of software here, LaTeX, which has several packages useful for Arabic typesetting. And in particular, this package, Ecdosis, developed by Robert Alessi in Aix-en-Provence, which is suited to the production of scholarly editions of Arabic texts with a proper critical apparatus and so on. It can handle this kind of project. And Robert is at the moment actually developing very actively the package and making it even more geared towards the production of fully compliant XML texts. So this should help a lot in the production of Arabic texts, of a good standard Arabic texts that are suited to for online display and sharing of different sorts. Here is, in relation to these two, a similar, well, sorry, just to explain a little, what we have here, this kind of input corresponds then to the output in, so you work like this. It's a very unfriendly software, really. I was almost forced to get into it at some point years ago, but then of course it becomes easy. It has what they call a steep learning curve. It's really steep. But if you had the time and the inclination, then maybe, you know, it's a powerful tool. And it works in a very friendly, scholarly way. So this is a very remarkable community of people who are working on this really for educational purposes. So highly recommended. And so here is this is a new format of editions that Brill are. I think it's a bit experimental on the part of Brill, but they have brought out already a few publications where you have bilingual editions with Arabic, you know, in a more or less standard compliant format. And here is just a mention. I wanted to mention this Munich-based Ptolemy project, which has a very impressive way of displaying and managing complex Arabic and Latin editions. And by the way, just before I continue, let me know, some of the images of the manuscripts have no attribution there, but by all means, ask me after the talk, and I have all these details. And if you want any more information about any of these projects, I'd be happy to discuss that too. So what this software that I was showing here tries to do is to provide new tools for the old work of philology, to make repetitive tasks more accurate and easier, and to connect them directly to the digital end products, which may eventually open up to future presentations and treatment of the text. And going still on the nautical aspect side of things, this is the al-Mahriya, perhaps the second most comprehensive nautical work in the late medieval Indian Ocean, written by Suleiman al-Mahri in 1511. The contents of the text overlaps to a great extent with Ibn Majid's Fawaid, though it is notably more concise and it adds an interesting level of subtlety to astronomical topics. Even Majid can be very chatty, introducing poems, and he goes on digressions for pages, and then he goes back to the technical stuff. Al-Mahri is quite the opposite. So maybe reading them in tandem is a good idea. And the final part of this work of the Umda is a lengthy and very detailed description of several voyages through the Red Sea. We are working on a digital edition of this treatise in collaboration with Eric Staples from Sayed University in Abu Dhabi, and with the help of Zishan Sheikh from Southampton University. Our aim is to have the text in both English and Arabic available online, along with digital representations of a few key sections. This way, the reader will be able to search through the treatise as well as to visualize the information it conveys. And as we advance in this work of clarification of the text, bringing out the context of the text, with the help of historians of science, and also enrolling some of our colleagues who are retired naval officers and other hands-on sailors, well, like Eric Staples himself, we thought that it would be helpful for us as we are translating, and for the readers to experiment with the display of information. 3 cases typical of this and reflecting the varied contents of the literature are the following. So these are 3 ways in which we are bringing information out visually from this text by Al-Mahri. So first is his information about the nautical rhombs. These 32 directions of the horizon I was saying. Al-Mahri introduces the stars, gives the values of their declinations, the size of the circle they make around the sphere, and the way these stars are observed differently depending on the latitude of the observer. Many technical details about their observation. And so as we were reading and translating this section, we created a preliminary visual representation here that allowed us to understand, primarily for us, trying to make sense of the text. Visually, it helps. What was the information he was trying to convey? So this light here on the right represents the fact that at a latitude of 45 degrees, the southernmost stars are not visible, while the first northern rhombs are circumpolar. That is, they're always seeing around the North Pole, the celestial North Pole. So of course, we don't expect that this will be very reader friendly and helpful for most readers, but it is an example of how, in order for us ourselves, as we are reading in a group to these highly technical works, trying to make sense of them, to understand, we are trying to make use of any digital tools that are available to us. And this in particular is a work by Inesh, who is handy with this geometrical software. A second example of this kind of visualization has to do with Stellarium. Stellarium is a virtual planetarium, an excellent piece of software you can download also for free. And it's very much used by people who study the history of astronomy. It allows you to look at the configuration of the sky at any desired time. You can put in the day of your birthday, for example, and see how did it look in the place where you were born. Or if you can check the birth date of Tutankhamun, you know, and it goes back a long time, and it has a great academic background, so it's really is well made and used by historians of astronomy and astrology. So what we have been doing is confronting the information these texts describe with the images of Stellarium. The example shown here has to do with the positions of the guardians, Al-Farqadan. So yes, these two stars here, they revolve. So the celestial pole is there. If you go out here in the UK, it's a bit more difficult because it's so often cloudy. But if you look at the sky again, you see in the direction of the north how everything is rotating around the center. And these two stars, Al-Farqadan, the guardians, sometimes they will be horizontal to each other, and then they move vertical, and then horizontal on the other side. It's almost like the dials of a clock, and they were used like that. And they can, because of the relation they have with the polar star, they can be used to ascertain and to refine the measure of the latitude, because the height of this star here, the polar star, the height in its relation to the horizon gives you practically your latitude. Yes. So if the polar star is right at the horizon, you are near the equator. Yes. The higher north you go, here in the UK, it's like up there, the polar star. So sometimes we come across a passage which is speaking about the appearance of a certain star at a certain time of the year, and then we can try and corroborate the astronomical observations of 5 centuries ago thanks to this virtual planetarium. You introduce the date, and then we try to check, oh, what does he mean? What direction did he really mean? So we can check there where exactly on the horizon a certain star was rising on a given date. And then this really has helped us very practically sometimes to make sense of the text. Yes, and third, mapping with Google Earth, this final chapter of Al-Mahri, it really is a little painful to go through, very, very detailed about the navigation through the Red Sea. And the Red Sea has a very complicated navigation, as some of you probably know. It has a pattern of winds that makes difficult the advance, especially if you're going northwards. And also it has lots of reefs and shoals. The coast is very, very tricky. And then Al-Mahri is describing the advance along this coast. And he has, for example, indications in case the wind is strong, in case the wind is mild, differences in the advance. So, and he gives lots of names of very little, a rock that is found near this place, and then, but some things that it's really very hard to track down to today's names. In some cases, we have had surprises, simply, of course, we use many sources, but just by zooming in Google Earth, sometimes we've had a couple of big surprises and shouts of Eureka, when you are suddenly finding a name which is obviously the same name they used 5 centuries ago for a little rock in the middle of the sea there. And so what we have here, and this is all really Zishan's work, we give Zishan the input of the text, and then he maps it onto this. And of course, being Google Earth, you can zoom in, and it has all the eye candy of Google Earth. It's very nice to see, almost like a movie. And you can see all the points here with the names of the places and the different colors of the routes. Like here, this is zooming in, depending on the intensity of the wind and so on. And here, the same file contains the text itself. So it's a very clever way of having an edition that incorporates at the same time directly a visual representation. So this is for geographic texts, this is a very useful tool. We're fine with time, yes. And then moving on from the nautical material, let's have a look at this Gulbenkian manuscript, the Tuhfat al-Hakam. This, we have here the full title of the book, Dawā'ir al Ulūm, wa-Jadāwil al-Ruqūm, and the author, again, early 19th century, and we assume that the work is approximately early 19th century. This book presents, this is the opening page, yes, and here is zooming in just a little sentence there. Most of the page is really, most of these 2 pages are just a table of contents of the book. And it's very interesting that this book only really contains 1 line of original text, 1 sentence, and it's this one. Because all the rest, you know, are the invocations, then the table of contents. And after that, we have like 80 pages of diagrams of different sorts, conveying information, which is traditional, some scientific information, some hadith, some sharia, all put in circles and in tables. We'll see some of the pages. But the only original piece of text is this. فَهَذِهِ هَدِيَةِ النَّمْلَةِ إِلَى حَضْرَةِ سُلَيْمَانَ. This is the gift of the ant to Prophet Sulaiman. So, of course, this is a reference to Quran 27. And of course, this is the reward that the ant is giving to Solomon for not crushing its people with his army, right? And then the little ant is giving this great king as a gift all the knowledge in the world, approximately, which is obviously what the book is about, you will see. Because maybe because the ants' buildings are so geometrical, what they call cavity geometry, the book turns out to be a collection of diagrams inscribed with ant-like minuscule letters. And it can also be most aptly described as an encyclopedia, thinking specifically on the origin of the Greek word encyclopedia. Yes, a paideia in a circle, an education in a circle, a teaching in a circle. Because nothing escapes the circle, like the horizon, going back for a second to these geographical images. Where I am standing now, I have a particular horizon. If I move a little this way, my horizon moves. And if I move this way, my horizon has moved, but I can never escape the horizon. It's always, we are trapped, each one of us, by a particular horizon. And this is what happens with the circle. Geometrically, they say the circle is the shape with the largest area for a given perimeter. And I think something similar happens with the sphere. I'm thinking again of the onion, of course. So the book gathers, or we could say rounds up, knowledge from very different fields, religion, astronomy, geomancy, raml, and represents it in tables and circles. Now, before discussing briefly our experience with this manuscript, I would like to recall the 2 clear major phases, degrees or moments in the work of digital humanities, as we move from the manuscript and the printed paper to the full-fledged digital edition. First, we have the digitized pages, like photos or scans of a print source where the text is image. And second, when the pages are encoded as text, which may be searched through their contents, selected, edited, where text is a string of characters in technical terms. That is, digital humanities work on different levels of complexity. The most basic and fundamental one is digitization. Scholars need something that allows them to move back and forward visually through the text, to zoom in and out, and to look at different details without compromising the physical manuscript. Here, it is crucial that the digitized images are generated carefully, which means paying attention to resolution, light, and color in order to guarantee a clear reading. This should ideally be much more than microfilm quality images to make easier rather than complicating the work of the researchers. So the first step in our research of the Tuhfa was to acquire high-resolution images of the pages that we were going to work with. Through them, it was possible for us to navigate easily within the book and focus on fine details. This example here shows a representation of the Aristotelian conception of the cosmos. We have, again, like in the Cresques Catalan Atlas, the spheres. At the center is the earth, the elements, and up in the corners of the page, these represent in more detail some of the details of the movements of some planets in their Ptolemaic description. So it gets very technical in a medieval astronomical way. Most of the words in the inner circles are too blurred to be read, but zooming in, then you can, maybe it's not possible to appreciate it here, but when zooming in, it was possible for us to see some of the words, Kurat al-Hawa and so on, the sphere of the air. And now a second fundamental step after digitization is finding online digital repositories. The Gulbenkian manuscript is not yet available online, but we were able to identify other copies of the book in international libraries. We found 4 so far, one in Qatar, one in Princeton, in Cairo, and Tehran. I think there are 2 in Tehran, actually. The first one was already online in open access, and well, with the one in Princeton is available online, etc. And here we have these different versions. For just one example. This is a page that represents al-Mizan, yes, the scales of good and bad, and it has a lot to do with Surah Ar-Rahman, yes, the duality of the cosmos. And you can see here the differences in the different manuscripts. Unfortunately, these last 2 reproductions don't have such good resolution. But anyway, by comparing them, we have been able to read quite a bit of the manuscript, especially because some of the pages of the Gulbenkian manuscripts were badly damaged in a flood in Lisbon in the 50s or 60s, I think. Yes, you can see here, for example, this is a page where you can see on the left how the Lisbon manuscript would really almost illegible. But with the help of the Princeton manuscript on the right, we were able to read it. Dawā'ir al Ulūm, right? And now the following 4 slides show some of our experimentation, or playing really, with trying to reproduce some of the visual features of the Tuhfa, because one of the most fascinating aspects of this manuscript is actually how inseparable are in the manuscript in this book the page layout or the text layout and the contents itself, the text itself. For example, just to give you an idea of that, I'll go back to this big image at the beginning. This is the beginning of the book, where we have here a hadith. This is a Shia hadith found in the Bihar al-Anwar, going down here, and then the text, and then the circles, the concentric circles, their number and the contents of the lines here correspond to things mentioned in the text on the margins of the circle. So there is a full integration between the geometry of the diagram and the text around it. Yes, but this is just one of the cases. Throughout the manuscript, there are not many actually that have so much text as this. There is very little text. But we have enumerations. You see, for example, principles of Aqidah, the fundamentals of prayer and things like that, all put in circles. Yes. And it really makes you wonder, and it has made us also reflect a lot on what they think they call it the science of display of information. Like when we tabulate knowledge, yes, or information, if we have data, yes, what difference does it make? Yes, well, normally it's not too different. For us, for example, I think very often we are between tables and data tabulated and then graphics. We are all used to this, yes. Even the software we are familiar with, like Excel, oh yes, give me a graphic, yes, and it shows you bars or a pie representation. So it has to do with this kind of thing, yes. What does it do to your acquisition of information, to the transmission of information? How is it altered when you modify the way it is displayed? Yes, and especially if it is displayed in these very complex patterns. Yes, we'll go back a little to this maybe later. So here are some of our experiments. For example, here, you know, one of our collaborators in Lisbon was trying to put lines with new software on the planetary diagrams to make them clearer and actually in the exhibition at the museum now we have a couple of pieces where you can see this so that the public can appreciate a little more clearly what is the information on the page. Yes. And this is again some experimentation with LaTeX, yes, trying to see you know, some of the text. This is text taken from the translation of one of the hadith there, and then reading on a spiral. Yes. At some point during the preparation of the exhibition, for example, we were thinking of having a rotating table with a text to see also what would the reactions of the public be if you have a text written on a spiral. Yes, how do you read it? Yes, let's say if I had my presentation text written on a spiral, imagine the complication now. Yes, I would spend my talk like this. Or if we have it on an exhibition, then maybe people would be reading in circles. So what happens? What does that kind of text do to the reader? Yes, I think this is a great question for designers. For example, when you make a poster, yes, I think the good designers think about these things. Yes, and very often we have all seen this. I think, you know, when people are looking at a display on the wall and then you go trying to read. Yes. And here, just trying to reproduce the concentric circles. I can't remember, I think this uses just 34, I think, just 34 concentric circles, but some of the diagrams there have something like 50, more than 50 concentric circles. And one of our colleagues was pointing out to us, who is an expert on the craft of making this kind of manuscript, showing us the tip of the compass, how you can still see it on the center of the page, and explaining to us what a great level of skill was required to make from the preparation of the ink with the correct density and the cut of the pen with a very precise slant and fineness, yes, to allow the designer of the page to make all these concentric circles with ink and not spilling it and not make a big mess. I have personally tried to experiment a little after working on this text, and I'm more and more in awe at the skill of these people. And finally here, we have this, again, trying to reproduce some of the diagrams there. And the one we have here, and it brings us back partially to the nautical writings, because it is a correspondence between the 12 signs of the solar zodiac in the center Yes, so a division in 12 of the circle and a division in 28 of the lunar mansions. Yes, so the division in 28 was very commonly used by the navigators, because imagine if the heaven is a ruler. Yes, when we are looking at the sky now and we are using the solar signs, which are 12, we have above the horizon half of 12. Yes, so we have only 6 divisions. The others are, we can't see them. Yes, but if we are using the lunar mansions, a division of 28, then we will have the sky divided in 14 parts. So we can measure with a lot more accuracy the passing of time. And this is the practical explanation why these lunar mansions were so important for, not just for navigation, but for many other practical purposes in medieval cultures. Especially in the Arabian Peninsula, you know, it is well known, and in other parts around the Indian Ocean. So, of course, trying to work for us practically in this recreation of patterns and of the texts, they make us realize concretely what an amazing piece of design this manuscript is. And as I was saying, the level of the technical execution, also the calligraphy. It would be great to have this manuscript actually assessed by a calligrapher. I would very much like that. But then let me move to some closing reflections. And first, I would like to make clear that it has been very far from my intention to present some wowing slides here. Wow. To amaze the audience with sophisticated developments. There is in digital humanities a permanent tendency, we have noticed it in our own work time and again, to be enthralled, to be fascinated by technical novelties, exactly as it happens with our everyday gadgets. And of course, we have every right and probably the need, and now probably even the duty, to enjoy and make use of the fancy new features of the gadgets. But it becomes distracting for our work if we forget that all these applications are tools and that they exist and come into existence for a particular purpose, the furthering of knowledge, for research and education. We have felt and we feel, and when we are working like this in digital humanities, that we have to be always alert, always to be aware of the lure of the technological novelty. It feels almost at times as if we could speak of a siren song of the digital humanities. Yes, and you know, in the mythical telling of the siren song in the Odyssey, what is the way to be able to benefit from the beauty of the siren song without dying? Yes, you remember Odysseus asked his sailors to tie him to the mast of the ship and to cover their ears. So he wanted to hear to listen to the siren song, and he knew that it was known that anyone who heard it would become crazy and kill the people, or I don't know, jump off the ship or something. So he asked to be tied to the mast when they were going near the sirens, and all the sailors had their ears covered, so they sailed through, no problem, and he could listen to it and not die. So, well, just a point of reflection. We need some kind of mast like that maybe when we're dealing with this technology and some sailors. And of course, we want to avoid the situation of this poor chap. You can tell that the slide is borrowed from a Spanish context because it has the opening question mark. But I think the proverb is more or less universal, right? That the cart and the donkey have to be in the right order. And we want to avoid pulling the cart of technology. So of course, this being so, with these possible problems, it is natural that a significant body of scholarly reflection is underway and has been forthcoming regarding these technologies. And I have here some examples. This book in particular, I highly recommend, by Cornelis van Lith, Among Digitized Manuscripts. I think actually it is an open access book. You can download it. And these are just examples of initiatives. I think this is in Canada. Online initiatives, you know. And I will speak a little more about this international work. So unfortunately, something that happens is that this kind of output tends to exist in parallel, literally, never meeting with the advances in the technology. There is the reflection and there is the theoretical elaboration, and the technology is going its own way and at its own pace, usually dictated by commercial interests. So the acuteness of this disjoint between the technical developments and its related body of theoretical reflection has come spectacularly to a head now with the apparently sudden onset of large language models, LLM, such as ChatGPT, which has shown how out of step these two lines of scientific activity can come to be. So every day in the news, practically. Yes, oh, AI is coming. Yes, something like that. Suddenly, it's not just the press and the politicians, but the scientific community and the developers themselves are all jointly shouting, wait, we need to pause and think this properly. And I was very surprised. I had the opportunity to attend a lecture in Cambridge last week at the Minderoo Center for Technology and Democracy, St. Catherine's. And I was very surprised that they also are thinking along these lines, you know, that they have taken a lot of time to reflect on these issues, and they know the technology very well, and very much along these lines. But from our point of view, at the reading room, the library, and the classroom, a number of well-defined conditions can be kept in sight to walk safely the line between the extremes, and to thus really benefit from the technical advances, to really cash in, as it were, on the promises of the technology. Let's name some of these most important conditions. These are the helpful conditions: that we abide by international standards in encoding, in bibliographic conventions, in data structuring, in data storage, etc., towards the semantic web, to make internet data machine readable. And then collegiate work. No lone wolves, no institutions going it alone, but collaborative efforts, capitalizing on each other's strengths and experiences. Decentralized multilingual technology. Not exclusive, not Eurocentric. We need to learn how to take full advantage of having a language of international communication, a de facto language, while dismantling the historical impositions and prejudices that have hitherto been related to it. A tricky act, if there is one, but worth persistent and constant effort. And finally, non-profit work, independent of state actors and of corporative interests, in the direction of the open source and open software movements. Plutocracy has taken over as the de facto political system of our contemporary world. It, by nature, erodes the foundations of the educational systems worldwide, because knowledge is by nature radiating. It thrives on sharing. It illustrates the paradox of a sharing that does not diminish the capital, but on the contrary. The more I teach, the more I learn. The more I give, the more I have. This is the paradox of teaching, of sharing knowledge. From all this ongoing work, a key takeaway for us has been the following. with these tools in the thick of the work, as we are on and off bewitched by the amazing new features, we are always halfway between source code and digital edition, in a floating world, a barzakh, which is actually closer to the essential nature of text than paper and ink could be. And this may be, in fact, an important step in the appreciation of digital humanities, if not a precondition to its usefulness, to realize that digital texts are closer to what text essentially is in the mind as an ever interconnected subtle reality, closer to orality in its malleability and mercuriality. It is the voice and not the paper and ink that is closer to the reality of language. And digital humanities are, maybe unawares, bringing us closer into that direction, opening up sometimes unexpected vistas and new possibilities. Very often, it is clear that the digital humanities work we do is not for ourselves, but for future generations of scholars that will be able to benefit from our accumulated work. So we are all very used to the idea when we speak of text, we immediately think of a book. But what I'm trying to say is that the reality of text is something fluid. And this actually can be seen when you start studying many books and the variations of a text through many books. Yes, you really perceive that mercuriality of language. So the digital format of a text is actually something closer to that. I think all this has a little to do, and especially the nature of the repositories online, just to finish now, with the concept of memory, and also in this relation with the meaning of text. Are we creating a memory, or are we creating merely repositories? To understand the relation between memory and the accumulation of data, we need to understand that memory, properly speaking, operates at a speed that looks like immobility from the point of view of daily life, of the solar rhythm of day and night. If we think of what memory is from this rhythm of, the sun is setting down, the clock is ticking, the concept of memory, the real, what we could call memory in a proper sense, moves at a speed which is like a very slow tortoise. It's not moving. It is the speed, perhaps, of contemplation. And this is why, in the highest levels of scholarship and academic study, there is always this fierce, dogged, yet discreet struggle to preserve a space for contemplation, for very, very, very slow reading. And we try to combine that very slow reading with the fast developments of the technology and so on. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Juan. I'm amazed, and we are amazed, even though it wasn't your intention. Thank you so very much. This is fascinating, and this kind of fascinating research really makes research of scholars of 20th century like myself look really boring. So thank you very much. Fascinating. I'm gonna open the floor for questions and comments, and I'm gonna ask you to use the microphone. Who wants to start? Yes, please.
Thank you very much. Super interesting. A question about these nautical manuals. More about the use of these and the intended audience. There are in Arabic literature a number of these manuals for agriculture, nautical navigation, a lot of things that are very technical. And at the same time, it's hard to imagine that a farmer would be using agricultural manual, right?
Yes.
So the same thing for these nautical manuals. Are they really written for navigators, or
Yes.
and is there any proof of these really being used on a ship?
Yes. Thank you. Excellent question. It is a question that we have asked ourselves often, especially when reading the Fawaid, because it is so encyclopedic, you know, and you would sometimes he goes on these tirades of like 3 pages with a poem of pre-Islamic poetry about in relation to one of the stars he mentioned, and you wonder what good was this for the captain of a ship, you know, wasting his time with these pages. And so especially this particular book, which is like almost unfortunately the only one really that has been translated fully into English and into European languages, pretty much. There is a Russian translation of the al-Mahriya, but it hasn't even been republished, I think. So this particular book, we think, well, we don't know really what to think yet, but it was obviously not meant as a practical manual. But even Majid has other works, very short works, that will look very much more like manuals and technical things, and al-Mahri too. And then we have, for example, some of the Mahri manuals, some of the manuscript copies of that have notes of crossings from one place to the other, giving dates. Departure this date, arrival this date. So they must have been used. And this beautiful damaged manuscript in Lisbon, and some of the others we have found of this second generation of manuals, which are like 18th, 19th century, they also have these kind of annotations of having been used for crossings with particular dates and the year and so on. And even in this Lisbon manuscript, which I had the opportunity to study in a lot of detail, it's stained, you know, with greasy substances. And I don't know, of course, we don't know the history of the manuscript, but I like very much to fancy that it was on board somewhere and something was spilled on it and that it's the real thing. Yes.
Right. Yes, of course.
Peter is your name, sir?
Yes.
Yes.
Fascinating stuff. Can I ask you a question? I know you try to illustrate various addresses, various records. People have been flying the seas for thousands of years, at least couple of thousand, say between the west coast of India to either the Gulf or the Egyptian coast, Red Sea. Are there any old records and old navigational tools, etc.?
To where, sorry?
Navigational guidance, say A to Z or something like that.
From earlier times.
From earlier.
Um,
Or how did they travel?
yes. Yes, there are some testimonies. There are some testimonies of other cultures traveling through the Indian Ocean, and I think, I'm not sure if it's Akkadian or Sumerian texts or both. And actually, our colleague Eric in Abu Dhabi is right now reconstructing I think it's a Sumerian boat in Abu Dhabi, building it, a beautiful work. And part of what he's using for the reconstruction are very ancient texts describing the way they would build one of these boats. And there are a few Greek texts. For example, there is a very famous periplon, I think it's called, of the Red Sea, but they read more, but they are not quite like the nautical literature that we would find later on in the 15th century. We also have in this Arabic literature and in earlier Arabic literature mention of manuals earlier on, and the mentions bring us as back as the 10th century, I think it is, whereby we know that in the 10th century these manuals existed and were used for navigation. And these were already Arabic manuals. So this is what also, apparently there are some texts, I don't know about this personally, in Pahlavi, in Old Persian, about navigation as well. The person who has studied many of these ages of navigation in the Indian Ocean that I know is Professor Dionysius Agius. He's in Exeter, and I think he has published a little about this continuity. And he has the interesting idea that over the course of the centuries, different cultures took over the role of writing down, as it were, the nautical tradition, the nautical craft, the practice. So what he says is that the period we are studying here with the Arabic nautical manuals is just another iteration of this. And what is, I think, clear from not just from this, but from archaeological evidence as well, and many varied sources, is that the Indian Ocean has the navigation through the Indian Ocean, and also even to a certain extent, not just coastal navigation, but going into the high sea, or to a little, some of the main routes like Gujarat, Oman, that kind of, or the west coast of India and the peninsula. These routes are very, very old. Yes, that seems to be beyond question. But the textual history is far from being continuous. One thing here, one thing there, but there are some. Yes.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
It's a question and at the same time a comment about Peter and Ashok about the fact that it's absolutely true that we have this pre-Islamic knowledge, but we have also compilation because about Ibn Majid. But I was introduced by Guy at the CNRS in Paris 25 years ago about Ibn Majid. And I have this feeling, and I don't know what you think about it, that the fact that it's more like a kind of compilation of existing knowledge, and not only about culture with written history, but also oral tradition. You mentioned the Polynesian. I was thinking about the Austronesian coming from Southeast Asia to Madagascar.
Yeah.
And I would like to have an opinion about that. The work of compilation that has been done by Ibn Majid, and also the combination or the relationship between oral traditions and writing traditions. And I don't know, in your title, you mentioned astrolabs, but I'm very interested by astrolabs. So I don't know if you can try to explain to us if there is a relationship with the astrolabs and the nice diagram and drawings that you show us.
Yes, thank you. Very good. Yes, absolutely. About it's a hybrid literature completely, and you can see. So one aspect of the Fawaid, which is interesting in Ibn Majid, is that because it is so rambling in a way, he gets to include much material which is very obviously of earlier provenance and from different origins. But even without that, even if you stick to the very technical texts of Ibn Majid or Al-Mahri, immediately you start finding that, for example, key words like names of stars and constellations are not of Arabic origin. They are Persian, and there are words that obviously had some Greek influence. So, and some words, and he mentions explicitly, or they mention words borrowed from Southeast Asia. Yes, they speak of the Cholas in that civilization. So very much a hybrid literature, About the astrolabe, yes, this is a very interesting thing because, as you know, the Arabic astronomy, in Arabic astronomy, they were great masters of the astrolabe and the building of astrolabes, the calculations. So there is this immense tradition of Arabic astronomy, the Arabic scholarly tradition of astronomy. And the very interesting fact is how the Arabic navigators of the Indian Ocean were aware of this scholarly tradition, and they mention, Ibn Majid, and I think Al-Mahri does too, they mention oh yes, Al-Farghani and Fulan. They make this, mention these big names, but they don't use any of their scholarly knowledge of astronomy. They stick to what is practical for them. And in this is one of the features that shows how really very practical, hands-on this literature is. And then this is why, also the astrolabe is an instrument that requires a stable place for observation. It cannot be used on a boat. And this is why at some point early on, when the people in Portugal and Spain were starting to go very deep into the ocean, like spending months at sea without seeing land, and it became obvious that they needed a bit more astronomy, then they developed this simplified form of the astrolabe, which is now, I think, called the nautical astrolabe, which is a very simple thing without all the beautiful net that you see in the proper, university astrolabes, but which served its purpose, which was mostly to take the height of the sun. And it was a heavy thing. They made it very heavy so that when you were at sea and you were using it, would still be, you could still make reliable observations. It was so heavy that they spoke of weighing the sun. When someone was going to use it on board, they would go out, and adjust the little thing here to let the ray of the sun come through. And this was a very heavy thing. So they would say you were weighing the sun to get the latitude, the height of the sun. But this astrolabe was not used in the Indian Ocean, you see, so they didn't have any use for the astrolabes, actually. One of the very interesting features of this new later literature in the Indian Ocean that I was showing, like in the Lisbon manuscript, is how they have incorporated in the early 19th century lots of these more sophisticated geometrical astronomy, lots of trigonometry, and they have blended that with the existing late medieval tradition of Ibn Majid and al-Mahri, and you find that in this manner. And this is a research that it's just starting, actually. I hope to spend the next few years working on that. Yes, thank you.
We have time for one last question or comment. Yes.
Thanks, Gwen, for this presentation. I have a comment, regarding Peter's previous question, which I think it goes both ways. It's a professional and practical knowledge that it's been collected from sailors, in fact, and then it goes back to the new generation of sailors, rather than someone alone who's doing it, who's writing the manuscript. Magid was not writing it from scratch. He was a sailor, and he worked with sailors, and then it's a common knowledge for sailors, and then he started to record it. My question for you, while working on this manuscript, if you come across any mention of Ibn Majid's father, who was named as the Bahrain, the god of two seas, Bahr al-Arab and Bahr al-Ajam. And he wrote something that got lost. He wrote a long poem on describing the differences between the Arabian Sea and the ocean. I don't know if you come across any of.
Well, I came across a very interesting article in Arabic some time ago. I found it in Mideo, actually, in the Dominican, in the Institute Dominican, where someone wrote an article about Abna Ibn Majid. I think it was the two Ibn Majids, because he said, so this guy is saying that maybe some of the writings that we have as Ibn Majid were not the sons, but the fathers. But as far as we know, we have no indication to think that this is a possibility. But yes, well, this is all I know. And he mentions, of course, Ibn Majid himself, he mentioned his father occasionally as being a great navigator and so on. But as for his writings, yeah, I think actually there is mention even of writings, but we don't have anything so far with the titles that come in the text itself. Yes.
It was a Nazmi, I mean, but it got lost. It was a Guza or Nazmi, just a poetry.
Probably. Well, maybe we still can find it.
One day. Thank you.
Thank you so
Thank
very
you.
much. Food and drinks over which we can continue the conversation outside. Please join us and thank you again.
Okay.
Thank you.